The ocean was making strange noises under the tropical sun as tourists on the beach enjoyed a quiet afternoon. Suddenly, a massive Boeing 767 appeared on the horizon, flying dangerously low and wobbling in the sky. What started as a distant rumble grew into a deafening roar as the plane, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961, plummeted toward the azure waters near the Comoros Islands. In a desperate last-minute attempt, the pilot angled the jet to ditch in the ocean, but a wing clipped the water, tearing the aircraft apart. The once peaceful beach turned into a chaotic scene of screaming survivors, rushing rescuers, and a sinking fuselage. This wasn't just an aviation accident. It was a hijacking that spiraled into one of the most tragic and perplexing disasters in aviation history. But how did it come to this? To understand the full weight of what happened that day, we need to start at the very beginning. A calm morning in Addis Ababa, with passengers boarding a routine flight that would soon become anything but ordinary. Well, I'm talking about the Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961, flying from Addis Ababa to Abidjan on the 23rd of November 1996, making its stops at Nairobi, Brazzaville, and Lagos. With 163 passengers and 12 crew members on board, including the pilots Captain Lul Abate, aged 42, and the first officer Jonas Mekuria, aged 34. The aircraft serving the flight was Boeing 767-200ER, powered by two Pratt and Whitney JT9 D7R4E engines. The plane was transferred to Ethiopian Airlines on the 22nd of October 1987, making it 9 years old at the time of the incident. On the 23rd of November 1996, the plane took off from Addis Ababa and was hijacked on the way to Nairobi, the first stop. But what actually was the reason for the hijacking? Well, to answer this question, you have to go back to Ethiopia and its political situation in the 20th century. By the time around the 1970s, Ethiopia was in chaos. The power struggle had ousted the emperor's regime. This led to civil war and tore the country apart. To make things worse, the crop failure pushed millions to the brink of starvation. Ethiopia was left with endless conflict, corruption, and famine. In the 1990s, the new Ethiopia emerged to the world as a new republic, ending the military rule. However, the political instability remained, which led to the people of Ethiopia being persecuted, imprisoned, and left with nothing, so they sought to escape it. These situations led to frequent hijacking in Ethiopia, especially in Ethiopian Airlines, and the same happened with Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961. Now, you might be thinking, is plane hijacking that easy? And what actually happened that led to such a huge incident? See, on November 23rd, 1996, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961 took off at 8:09 UTC from Addis Ababa. 20 minutes into the flight, around 8:29 UTC, passengers spotted three men running towards the cockpit. As they were running, one of them shouted, "Everybody should be seated, I have a bomb." Those Ethiopian hijackers charged the cockpit and hijacked the place with an axe and fire extinguisher, which they grabbed from their stowages, and assaulted First Officer Jonas Mekuria, forcing him out of the cabin. The hijackers claimed that there were 11 of them. However, they were actually three youngsters, Alemayehu Bekele Belene, Matthias Solomon Bele, and Sultan Ali Hussein. On top of that, among them were two unemployed high school graduates and a nurse. The two hijackers then went outside and made an announcement in Amharic, French, and English that they had a bomb, and if anyone tried to interfere with them, they would blow off the plane. But what were the demands of the hijackers, and was it possible to fulfill those demands? The hijackers initially demanded to change the destination to Australia. You might think, why Australia? Well, as I've already mentioned the situation in Ethiopia, the hijackers wanted to escape the harsh situation of their country and apply for political asylum in Australia. Their demand might not sound like something impossible. However, it was actually quite impossible, as the craft did not have enough fuel to reach even halfway to Australia. The pilot even showed hijackers the fuel quantity indicator on the fuel management panel and indicated what he actually had and asked them if they could refuel in Mombasa. The hijackers refused. The pilot now had two options. However, both were equally dangerous and life-risking. One, he could defy the orders of hijackers, get killed and put the craft in danger, or he could follow the orders of the hijackers, but they would end up lost in sea with no hope of rescue due to low fuel. Which option do you think the pilot should choose? Captain Lowell, instead of taking any of these fatal courses of actions, decided to keep the hijackers talking to keep the situation balanced. He then told the hijackers that he wanted to tell the Addis Ababa area control that they were changing their destination to Australia. Captain Lowell informed Addis Area Control Center that the aircraft had been hijacked and the destination had changed to Australia. The hijackers then stopped the pilot from making any communication with the control center. The pilot then started to slowly turn the plane towards the coast, as he had no intention of going towards the ocean. At around 8:30, Addis Ababa Area Control Center called Nairobi Area Control Center to advise that Flight 961 was diverting to Mombasa and that the aircraft was under unlawful interference. So, what would happen now? The fuel is about to run out and the hijackers are not ready to land anywhere but Australia. Hijackers had already planned something for themselves there, so they wanted to talk to someone directly in Australia. They asked the pilot to transmit their message to the control center to forward their message to their provided number in Australia. At 8:57, the pilot in command contacted the Nairobi control center and transmitted the message to be relayed to Australia. Captain Lowell, who had already been in this type of situation twice, took this opportunity and informed NACC of his flight level, position, fuel endurance, and heading. Then the pilot said to NACC, "I just wanted our hijackers to hear what you are communicating, and if you have anything to say, go ahead and tell them." The NACC then said, "I am advising you that with 2 hours of fuel, you will be unable to reach your destination and probably you will ditch in the ocean. The best solution is for you to land in Mombasa and pick some more fuel." However, instead of understanding, the hijackers asked the pilot to turn the radio off as they were not ready to negotiate at any cost. Their actions were actually telling that they were nothing but a bunch of immature youngsters. Now that the hijackers are not ready to understand the danger they are getting everyone into, how will the pilot land everyone with safety? Well, the pilot could think of nothing and started searching for a nearby area to land in radar discreetly, and luckily saw the Moroni International Airport runway in Comoros Islands. But as you know, luck doesn't always work in your favor. The low fuel caution came on at the same time. The pilot, instead of going any further, decided to trick the hijackers and started having rounds near Comoros Islands, as it was safer not to go far from land. At about 11:41 UTC, the right engine ran down to windmilling speed. The pilot begged the hijackers to land the plane or to let him tell the passengers about the situation so they can prepare themselves for what's coming next. However, the hijacker refused. Luckily, after some time, the hijacker decided to use some of his common sense and understood the fact that if the plane crashed, he would pass away as well. So he got up to discuss with his partners outside the pit. Since the hijack, this was the first time the hijacker left the pit, so the captain took it as an opportunity, picked up his microphone and addressed the passengers. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your pilot. We have run out of fuel and we are losing one engine this time. And we are expecting crash landing. And that is all I have to say. We have already lost one engine and I ask all passengers to react to the hijackers." However, in the middle of the message, the hijackers arrived and snatched the microphone. The captain started to descend the aircraft, but the hijacker was harshly playing with the controls, which disturbed the inputs. Eventually, the autopilot got disconnected and the plane got out of control. When the pilot got the control back, the left engine went dead. It seemed like the luck was going totally against them. The plane's altitude was decreasing, so the hijacker told the captain not to decrease the altitude of the plane. In reply, the pilot told the hijackers, "It will descend by itself. I am not making it descend." The hijackers then asked him not to touch the control, to which, out of exhaustion, the pilot replied, "We are dying. At any cost, we are dead. Myself, you, and all of us are dead." The hijacker then started to shout at the pilot, telling him to stop the craft from descending. Even at that time, the hijacker refused to understand the severity of the situation and was expecting the pilot to fulfill his senseless demand of landing in Australia. Now that the fuel ran out and both the engines failed, what will the pilot do? Can he convince the hijackers to let him land, or does he have to keep flying? Well, the first officer got up and went to the economy class to check on the passengers, where he saw all the passengers were in life jackets and many of them had inflated them. The first officer, with the help of other crew members, deflated the life jackets, showed the passengers how to inflate them, and instructed them not to inflate them until they were outside of the plane. They kept repeating the instructions as many times as they could. Then the first officer forced his way to the cockpit to help the captain lower. By now, the aircraft was descending toward the Indian Ocean by the Comoros Islands. The craft only had standby instruments due to fuel exhaustion. The hijackers left the crew alone to assume control. When the pilots got back control of the plane, the runway was already out of their sight. The pilots called for a mayday water crash landing. I mean, the only thing the pilots could do at that time was to land the plane in the water near the coast of Comoros Islands, parallel to the waves, to have a smooth landing. However, their attempt failed and the plane brushed the water in the left wing, low altitude, first, losing its balance. The pilots then tried to hold the plane in level, which in result broke the aircraft into 4 sections. Just the thought of it is horrifying, isn't it? Then what happened to everyone? Did they survive? And what about the hijackers? As the aircraft crashed into the water, water started to enter the craft with pressure, leaving everyone in panic. Those who did not have their seatbelt on passed away instantly due to the impact, including the hijackers. Now you understand the importance of fastening your seatbelt, right? Now, as the plane crashed near the coast, which was home to some of the most famous resorts of the country, many of the tourists, including a few doctors and a team of scuba divers, rushed to their rescue. Some people even made a video of the incident. Unfortunately, many of the passengers ignored the instructions of the first officer to keep their life jackets deflated in the plane and inflated their life jackets, which made it impossible for them to leave the plane, resulting in their unaliving. Others who kept the instruction in mind came out of the craft safely, after which they were rescued by the nearby people. Out of 175 people, including the crew members, 50 people survived the crash, including the 2 pilots. So what would you do if you were in this situation? Let me know in the comments below.